What's it feel like to travel as a Black queer person?
A lot of feelings come up when I think about traveling as a Black queer person. First, I'm always traveling as Black first. Like, that's how people view me, especially as someone who tends to move through the world as someone people assume to be cis and heterosexual. Cisgender and heterosexual for folks that are not familiar with those terms.
I think more recently for me, what's really been coming up as far as being trans and a traveler is the acknowledgement, the realization of what being trans is how that's going to impact me traveling. I read about another trans person talking about like them transitioning, and since transitioning, going to the airport takes longer. I haven't, except I think cutting my hair was a pretty big step for me in feeling more affirmed. I haven't really gone through, having top surgery and stuff like that. And I think realizing that those things are going to impact something that I find so much joy in, that may bring up other feelings.
I think by nature, I'm moved to take care of myself in whatever ways feel most accessible. And depending on the place that I'm traveling to, that might mean connecting with other queer or Black community, or that might mean feeding into people's assumptions that I am cis and heterosexual. And I know that's not everybody's jam, but that is something that I notice as I navigate different spaces, is that I'm always going to be attuned to protecting myself and making sure that I am safe and, able to have the best, most accessible experience that I can, and always trying to stay centered on joy as well, right? Because that's a part of this too. And I think sometimes conversations about traveling as queer can get bogged down by the protection and being hyper vigilant and like making sure that you're safe.
Like laws and all this.
Yeah, and the reality is like I'm traveling because I am so curious about different parts of the world and learning history and learning about culture and eating all the food that I can around the world. And that makes me happy. I feel very grateful, and I understand the privilege of being able to travel in the ways that I have, and that I think is central, right? So I want to center like the joy of the experience and the what I call addiction to travel. And just knowing that what is coloring that and shaping that, the ways that I move around, is like me understanding how I'm feeling in different environments. It has to be acknowledged that there is a privilege to being able to allow people to assume our cis assumed identities, and that not all Black, queer, and trans people can do that, and not everybody wants to do that.
Exactly.
But I think it is
more recently with navigating, explaining my identity to people, especially people that language their first, like explaining my identity to like my family back at home is like one feat, but then trying to explain it to someone in a different language, or that someone that doesn't have as much language, that I feel like that recently has really come up, because I find myself kind of balancing between wanting to put in the labor and the work of doing that, and sometimes just like letting them call me ella, linda, whatever, or letting them call me my previous name or whatever the case may be. So I feel like those parts feel heavy, because I feel like I'm having to make more intentional decisions when it comes to just showing up, as before I feel like I just showed up. And while I do acknowledge like being Black, and being Black did impact that in some ways, I feel like now with my identity being so more deeply intertwined with my just everyday experience of that, it feels heavy sometimes. But I don't think it takes away from the lightness that I feel of being Black and being abroad. I think we've both talked about this plenty of times on our channels, just the lightness of being in another country and feeling like more safe and feeling like